Thanks everybody for joining us today. I had a chance to look at a few of the registrations before we got started, and I saw a few names I know, so great for everyone to join today. And for those of you I haven't met, I'm Greg Zweig, and I look after our unified communications and solutions marketing for a number of our products. So I recognize that today, particularly for many of our existing customers, we're going to talk about some new things. And one of the things as I was thinking about this webinar and where to start, I think the thing that I really realized is we're going to start a conversation today around some of the next generation of our portfolio. And we really appreciate all of the myself and all of the people who are on the line with me today have been in this business for a number of years. We recognize how your businesses operate. And we realize, for the last, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so, starting in the late 90s, the conversation was all around triple play. I'm sure most of you remember when that started. And that really dominated this industry for a long time. But we all know that over the last 5 or 7 years, things have really changed, right? Really since almost maybe a decade now, since the iPhone and the smart mobile phones became popular. And today, in our conversations with you, what we hear over and over is that voice has changed for you, right? That broadband is really your lead offer today, less so voice. And as a result of that, you feel a lot of pressure around your OPEX cost associated with voice. You've also said, look, not only is our customers changing, but the way we install and manage our equipment is changing, and we prefer a more software-centric environment because that gives us more options as we go forward. We don't have to constantly worry about proprietary hardware that goes end of life. We want to make it easier for us to be able to transition our business no matter what we choose to do now or 5 years from now. And of course, it's really important that it be all SIP because the nature of our business is more and more this broadband environment. And we want to come up with ways to leverage an all IP access / mile, as well as peering to large service providers. And then we want to make sure that as we make those kind of strategic moves in our business, we want to make sure we don't lose control of our destiny. There are a number of cloud services and other scenarios out there that people have considered, but over and over again, what we hear from you is, look, it's still a big part of our business. Telecom and reliability is a big part of what makes us successful as a company. We want local survivability. We want to be able to make sure we don't lose control of our costs and conversely control over our revenue. And then given all those scenarios, Ribbon, we don't expect that just because we're thinking about moving forward that you're going to change the support on our existing products. So I know it's going to come up in this presentation because we're going to start talking about some new products. People are going to be concerned that we're about to announce, end of life or end of support on their existing C15. I want to get it across right now at the very first slide here that we talk about that your C15 portfolio, if you have one, is going to continue to be maintained, continue to be supported. The folks like Lee King, who many of you know, our support people, they're still there. What this is about today is talking about new opportunities and new options. And, there's no way for us to talk about something new other than to talk about it. And as soon as we start talking about something new, people get worried about what they have. And we want to make sure you understand that this is an and, not an or, right? So this is a new opportunity for you. So what are we doing? Well, we've created a new solution we call Ribbon Voice Sync. And the idea behind it is really that we want to be able to give you a common environment, a single environment that includes security, SIP call control, both residential and business, a media server and a very basic voicemail, class 4 routing and interconnect, an element managed solution, and tools to connect in billing, right? And what we've done is basically created this using existing elements of our ribbon solution. So rather than have to build something from scratch and deal with all the complexities of a release one product, what we've done is we've looked at a number of our existing assets and we've rolled those together to create a software-based solution that's simple to deploy, and we've designed it so that it hits the price points and size environment that you all need. We recognize, particularly with some of the line loss over the last few years, that you need something that's cost effective at 1,000 seats. That doesn't mean it can't grow to 5 or 10 or 20,000 seats because it's built on the same elements that we use in larger deployments, but we've created it in a way that gives a complete solution that's cost effective. So what we've done is we've basically combined together our PSX, which is our centralized routing engine, our application server, which many of you know we've had for many years, which gives you SIP call control, and we've used the MAS, or the Media Application Server, in that to give you media services and voicemail. We provided our SBC suite, which is our core SBC that provides access and peering, and we've rolled that together with some billing services and element management services. So the whole idea here is we've created basically a software stack, right? It all runs on VMware. So you can use customer-provided hardware, so your own hardware, and we can give you recommendations on that. Or you can use a cloud, all will work. And it's designed basically to provide sort of an all-in-one solution. We'll talk about the details, but it provides easy access to broadband services, and we'll talk about how you can add TDM as well as northbound services. So you can have things like PSTN interconnect, 911 services, and things like StirShake and our analytics platform. So the whole idea here is, like, as I keep repeating myself, is to give you this all-in-one environment. And just because it's all in one doesn't mean that we're not going to provide a rich set of services. So you see in the slide, this is a short list. It's not everything, but this gives you an idea of the kind of standard residential services that are already licensed in the box. So this means you have to buy one-off licenses to get what you see here in this pile of, there's probably another 3 pages on an Excel spreadsheet of other services. But you look at the list and you see these are the big ones, right? That customers require. This is how you can migrate legacy service over this platform and know that you're going to still have the standard features customers expect. And here's a big difference between our traditional C15 offers and this new voice sync offer is we're also providing a set of licensed business services. So you get more capabilities around the high value business services that many of you are looking for today. And what's nice about this is it doesn't require you to buy an add-on platform or add a third-party service in order to get them. These are things that are built in to the platform. So support for things like Poly or Yealink phones, a nice SIP trunking offer, including certified SIP trunks for Teams and Zoom, shared line appearances, find me, follow me, all the kinds of things that typically are required for small and medium-sized businesses in your geography. And then, of course, I touched on this, built-in voicemail services. So I know this comes up a lot, particularly nowadays where it's almost impossible to charge the voicemail, right? You have to be in a position where you typically have to buy something third party. In this situation, what we're doing is giving you an opportunity to use a very basic standard voicemail that doesn't require third party. We give you built-in media services to go with that. It's not, it's not a replacement for the world's most sophisticated UC voicemail system, but it's a great solution for probably 99% of your customers. And, again, something that you don't have to manage as a standalone solution.
Hey, Greg,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt that, but we have a couple poll questions. Did you want to do those now, or you want to?
Give me 1 second, Lance. I did skip by him, but I'll tell you what, when we get to the broadband slide, we'll ask that very question. That'll give us a good excuse.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Lance. We also have, in addition to the basic business services and basic voicemail, because this is a standard ribbon solution, you get to leverage all of our existing business relationships and all the things that we've done over the last 20 years with the application server. For those of you who aren't familiar with our AS, we have almost 30 million seats of that sold. And we have it in, big service providers, tier ones and tier twos. And so over those years, we've built all kinds of add-ons. So we have call center add-ons, we have soft client add-ons, we have call recording add-ons. So if you say, hey, I have a subset of my business that is really focused on maybe larger enterprises or sophisticated enterprises, you're not precluded from taking advantage and getting that revenue by adding things on. So what we're trying to do, as I keep sort of emphasizing, is give you a different way to attack your customers, both residential and business, and offer that sort of broadband integration. Now, I think like anything, when we start talking about new platforms, people start to get nervous and they say, well, what about what I have? Now, I already touched on the fact that, hey, the C15 support capabilities aren't going anywhere. But in addition to that, because we've added our PSX centralized routing engine into the offer, it gives you a built-in capability to integrate other solutions. So you can integrate your C15 into this new environment, the VoiceSync environment. You can integrate an existing T7000. You can also integrate a third-party solution like a Meta or a BroadSoft. And I know that many of you have small BroadSofts you bought maybe a decade ago that you're still using for business services. We can bring all of those into the environment, create a centralized routing where the VoiceSync sort of acts as the master and is able to parcel calls out across all of these different environments. So it's really a nice solution from top to bottom because it gives you a long-term migration strategy. If you have a T7000 and you're thinking, I need to hang on to this for a couple more years for whatever reason, but I don't want it to be the core of my network anymore, this is a great way to be able to bring something like that into the environment and then migrate the last mile as you maybe put in a fiber build or make other changes to your network. And then on the northbound side, we have a partnership with Telco Bridges, so we can do things like legacy TDM integration. We have our Identity Hub set of solutions. We can bring those into the equation for things like stir shaken and robocall mitigation. And of course, we can do things like enum and SS7 connectivity for ISUP. All of those scenarios are part of the core portfolio, and the PSX provides that central routing engine to kind of connect the dots together. We also, as I mentioned, have the full SBC suite software edition as part of the offer. This is our core SBC that we have deployed, I don't know, millions of sessions every day across the world running on this. So you can use this for both access and peering. So I know a number of you have legacy peering environments out there that you'd like to move off. This is a great way to make that move. Again, you don't have to buy something separate. It doesn't mean it won't integrate with an SBC you already have. You can connect those as peer-to-peer. But if you need a modern SBC in your environment, this is a great way to get one without having to buy something as a separate solution. And of course, billing. Now, this is something that always comes up. So we've created a couple of different ways in the solution to be able to integrate billing in, and of course an EMS solution to be able to manage the scenarios. So all of this is really focused on providing a solution that's ideally suited for broadband. And Lance, if I could ask you now to pop on and just go ahead and launch the poll. Folks, we want to ask you a couple of different questions. We actually have two. So Lance, why don't you, when you see that most of the folks have answered, why don't you just go ahead and launch the second poll question as well?
Sounds good. So you should be seeing that poll question on your screen. What % of your interconnect is SIP today? You can just obviously pick the closest answer there. You have 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%, and 0. So we've got about 15, 20% of the folks have answered, so we'll give it just another minute or two here and try to get to at least 50.
It gives Greg an excuse to get a drink of water too, Lance, so it's all
There
good.
you go. Yeah, we're right at 50 here, so we'll give it just another minute. Thank you all for participating. And while we're waiting on that reminder, please do use that ask a question box in the bottom right. As Greg goes through the material, we have a question, just put it in there. We got plenty of folks standing by that can answer those questions for you quickly. So, all right, so we're at a little over 60%. I think I'm going to go ahead. We have one more poll after this one. So I'm going to close this one so that I can share those results with everybody. So let me do that. And share. There we go. So there's your results from about 65% of the audience, Greg.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I would have expected that interconnect maybe to be a little closer to 50% as sort of the norm. So as I talked about a minute ago, I think that's it just goes to show the value of that built-in SBC suite as part of the solution.
Okay. I'll go ahead and hide these results and I'll get ready for the second poll question. Okay, so that should now be up on screen. Again, what percentage of your access is SIP today? Same choices as before, 100, 75, 50, 25, and 0.
I'm super curious about this answer, actually. I'm curious to hear where people are at. I know that with the number of extensive fiber builds that everyone's working on, that there's probably a lot of consideration of this, but I'm not sure. I'm curious to see how much of it's actually been actually transformed.
We've got about 40% at this point, almost 50. So we'll do the same thing. We'll try to get to that 65%, and then we'll share these results.
What's interesting here is, as I see the numbers grow, we have quite a number of folks who say that 100% of their access is SIP today. So that's very encouraging. More so than interconnect, I think.
Okay, we're almost there at the 65% mark. So I think I'm going to go ahead and close this one, and I'll share those results right here. And while I do that, again, just a reminder, everybody, please use that Ask a Question feature. Experts are standing by. Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks, Lance. So I think this ties nicely into this broadband slide. I think, so two things I see. One, I'm very encouraged by the number of providers who are already, anywhere between 50 and 100% of their last mile is pure SIP or broadband based. So that's very encouraging, because I think this really points to why we focused on creating the solution. We recognized that we needed to give you guys a different kind of an offer that's well served in this environment. So obviously, the solution we're proposing here is pure SIP. It doesn't matter from a ribbon voice sync perspective whether the physical layer is one type of broadband or another. The bottom line is that we've had application server-based residential services and business services going over broadband for probably more than a decade. So there should be no concern from your perspective about whether this solution will work in your broadband environment. It will. And for those of you who aren't familiar, last year Ribbon added a full IP optical suite to our solutions. So this also ties in nicely with that scenario. Now, I talked a little bit about, focused on the fact that we understand the requirements in this market. One of the things that Derek, who's on, and the rest of the product management team really spent time on was understanding how do we build a configuration that's very cost effective for 1,000 users, right? And we know that what those price points have to be, because we've done business with many of you for a long time, so we get it. And so what we've done is created, a basic config for 1,000 users and made it really easy to add blocks of 100 users. Now, all that being said, it's just as easy to expand this as I touched on earlier. If you have 5, 10, 20,000 seats, there's nothing that prevents this environment from expanding in that manner. We can also do something specific. So let's say that one of you has a robust interconnect business just because of geography. It's easy for us to add specific licenses for a specific capacity. So if you had something you needed way more SBC capacity or some other, you needed way more PSX capacity because you want to use it to glue together a very, large and distributed network, that's an easy solution as part of this licensing model. And it's not going to be punitive if you decide to go in that direction. So why do we think this is a better solution than our competitors? Well, for one thing, I think from a Ribbon perspective, you know that our primary business is supporting communication service providers like you. We're not focused on some other marketplace. This is our primary business. And you all have, many of you anyways, have dealt with our support organization for years. You know that we answer the phone and that we provide assistance. We think that we've got here an end-to-end solution that's more compelling than any of our competitors, right? The right kind of call control, security, billing, the opportunity to add layer on services. It's all software. That doesn't mean we can't help you from a hardware perspective and professional services perspective about getting stuff installed on your own hardware. But what it does is it reduces the chances of you getting caught in a situation 3 to 5 years from now where you have a piece of obsolete hardware and you can't leverage the software, which unfortunately sometimes happens with proprietary scenarios. And then last but not least, we feel like Ribbon Voice Sync, unlike some of the cloud solution, lets you control your own destiny. So you still get to touch your customers every day, manage their experience, and control your margins and costs. Because we recognize that it can be a challenge sometimes if you look to go to some of these cloud providers for something like residential services, which, the margins are thin on. If you get in a situation where 2 years down the line, somebody raises their prices, you're not in a position necessarily to be able to raise yours to the end customer, which means basically you take a haircut on margins. So if you look at this whole solution, we think, and we hope anyways that you think, that we've created a new offer here that complements the things that we've been selling for years and provides a sort of a next generation solution that matches where your business is at today and not where it was 20 years ago. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. And I've been yammering away here. So Elizabeth or Jeff or Jamie, are there any interesting questions that have come in that we'll discuss with the audience wide?
Hey, Greg. Yep, there was a question about, do you still own your own numbers or are they ported to Ribbon in this scenario?
This is absolutely your equipment when we deploy it. So no different than if you had one of our C15s, you own your own numbers, you're in control. You're in control of the deployment environment, you're in control of the services you offer, you're in control of the prices that you offer, and you're in control of your relationships with your peering community. It's 100% your environment.
Greg, another question to talk about local survivability. Could you expand more on that?
Yeah, so this was one of the reasons why we felt it was important to continue to offer a traditional platform in the sense that we want to be able to make sure that you all had a solution you could deploy in your geography and you knew would be fully operational. So for instance, if you were to lose connectivity to the internet, you didn't have to worry about the fact that your residential customers could be down. This is, again, from that perspective, traditional in the sense that you're putting a switch environment inside of your network. You can build it with resiliency and redundancy and be sure that if something happens to, I'll call it the outside world, your customers are still going to be able to stay connected. Other questions? Elizabeth, did I lose you?
Sorry, no, I was reading through some of the questions here.
I thought maybe you were talking away on mute. That's the standard for 2020 and 2021. You're on mute.
You're on mute. I think I should buy that t-shirt. Let's see, I was just typing through some of these. Yes, we will make sure that you get the charts regarding.
Absolutely.
And yes, some people are talking more about VoIP versus SIP. So one of the things that I think that we wanted to talk about, Greg, was the point that what we've tried to do is meet the request of the market regarding creating a 5 nines carrier grade voice solution that is more economical from an initial purchase and any ongoing associated maintenance to deliver voice. So the focus for this initial rollout has been specific to SIP, but we've made it very economical if there are, to help offset any charges to moving towards SIP. So I don't know if you want to talk more about that, Greg.
So I was reading as well. So you got to summarize that question for me as well. I was trying to go through the questions, Elizabeth. So the question I think is, if someone has MGCP or H248 and not SIP, what are the implications of that? Is that sort of the summary?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that, and exactly, and part of that answer, I believe, is the fact that we've worked really hard to make this economical up front, right, to help with any associated charges to moving to SIP directly.
Yeah, and we have some solutions, and we touched a little bit on some of the solutions. We have telco bridges for legacy, but we have tried to create a solution that's really focused on providing a pure SIP environment, but they're not necessarily something that we are developing internally, but there are a number of different ways that you can get from those 248 or MGCP environments into SIP. And most of them are cost effective. And the other thing I would say is that even if there is upfront investment, and I'm not discounting that because it's easy for a guy on a webinar to write checks because I don't have to sign them. But the reality is that there's a huge cost advantage long term to being in an all SIP environment because the infrastructure around, at all levels is lower cost and there's more choices in that environment. And that's one of the reasons we sort of made the decision to go pure SIP, because we recognize if you think about this, not just for what we're selling in 2021, but if you say, where are we going to be in 2026 or 2028? I think the answer is going to be it's 100% SIP. And so we wanted to put you all in a position where you had a platform that would be able to last for a decade or a decade and a half and still be a viable solution inside your business.
So Greg, there was a question here about how does it handle ISUP trunking, right? Do you want to cover that, or do you want me to, right? Basically, we have a gateway.
I know that, okay. Jeff, I know you're very familiar with that, so I'll let you handle that.
Yeah, I mean, basically from an ISUP trunking perspective, right, we have a gateway that we can roll into the solution to support that ISUP trunking environment, and that would tie into the overall solution.
And so there was another question: Will the EMS manage this platform and my C20? There can be a tie-in between the EMS and the C20 and the AS. It wouldn't necessarily tie together the SBC, but we could provide some familiarity, I guess, for folks who are managing both the C20 and a voice sync platform. And I don't know, just as an aside, I don't know the person who asked the question, I don't know if you have a traditional C20 platform too, but one other thing, that if you're not familiar, in 2020 we launched a virtualized C20 as well, which is a new platform that gives you some hardware independence as well and allows you to change the scale of a C20 deployment, which can be very compelling for somebody with a smaller C20 environment. Other questions? Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
redundancy?
Yeah, I was just going to answer the, it says, will their solution be able to act as a tandem? And with the PSX in there, right, we can utilize the PSX for a lot of that functionality along with the gateway to access the SS7 network. So yeah, there's pieces, I think on that one chart, Greg, where you showed coming out of the box, right? We would have a gateway in there and pieces to the SS7 network.
Let me find that.
Right, you can see right there that we show, a telco bridges there.
And also our SGX platform as well.
Yep.
Could provide some of the gateway support.
And our DSC, it's our DSC platform will be involved there.
Yeah. And we've been doing that for a long time. That's another example of where it really pays to be using a lot of our existing solutions. We have deployments in huge SS7 deployments, people like Tata Communications and others who many of you use probably for interconnect, who've been using these kind of environments for years. Any other questions, Jeff?
Let me look through here.
We'll hang on for a minute and try and catch everything before we wrap it up.
And while we're doing that, I just want to remind the audience that, yes, we will be sending an email later this afternoon with a link to the replay. We'll have the slides with that as well, so look for that to come later this afternoon. And don't forget about that handout if you haven't grabbed that yet. On the right side of your screen, you should see a little document icon. Just click that. We have our voice sync data sheet there to take with you if you'd like.
And of course, this is a webinar as an introduction. Don't forget that, many of you know some of the sales staff, Lee Edwards or Kevin Keogh or Steve, James and others. Any of these folks, the two Jeffs on the SC side, any of them will be happy to set up a one-on-one meeting and go through the platform in depth and go through some of the technical nuances of how to make all this work. So of course, this is just designed to be the introduction. Hopefully the first time, not the last, that you hear about it. So Jeff, someone else also asked about model for the solution, cost model for the solution. As I said, sort of the basic idea is the fact that it starts with 1,000 subscriber model. Doesn't mean you couldn't use it for less, but we kind of created a bulk environment that says that's our baseline for all the services. And then you can add licenses if you need to grow. We have blocks of 100, and we have, if you need specific, as I touched on earlier, if you need specific extra connectivity in say the SBC suite or the PSX, we can add those licenses as well. But again, we recognize the cost model you all have to get to, and we're trying to make this into an effective, cost-effective solution. And we do have obviously permanent licenses, but we all are also working on a monthly subscription-based model as well. We haven't put out that cost model yet, but that is in the works.
Yeah, and I would say reach out to your individual account rep, right, if you want to get an idea on the costing for your particular deployment.
Yeah, we've been working informally already with a few customers as we've rolled this out, and I know that Jeff has already done quotes for several environments, and we're already starting our first implementation. So so it's guaranteed whoever is on here, you will not be the first. Everyone's biggest fear.
Well, and Greg, to that point, I think you should talk for a second about the fact that, I mean, you spoke to it a little bit here, but basically, what's new here is that these are, what's not new, these products are deployed with, tier 1 carriers across the globe, right? What's new here is bundling this together into one solution so that it's easy to manage and getting it commercially rolled out to meet the needs of some of the smaller markets. That's what's new. So it's I don't want people to walk away thinking that that they're biting off something that's new here. This is definitely an area where Ribbon is investing, and again, many tier 1 service providers ride on these platforms. We have bundled it together. We have worked to optimize the rollout and implementation to make it easier to fit into our rural market customers.
Yeah, and just to kind of rattle off some names, you take something like the SBC SWE, that's the core SBC in the Verizon network. It's many of you peer with bandwidth. They're a huge SBC SWE user. The PSX, that's that runs the centralized routing for the entire AT&T wireless environment in North America. Pretty much every large class 4 network across the world uses PSX, folks like Tata, NTT, Orange, you can go around the globe and pick someone. The application server, I touched on it, 30 million seats sold. Big providers across the globe have that deployed. People like TELUS in Canada is someone I can think of off the top of my head. So all of these solutions have been deployed, most of them between a decade and 2 decades. Now, that doesn't mean they haven't had software upgrades and changes and virtualized environments, and it's all of that virtualization that makes a product like Ribbon Voice Sync possible, because years ago, we would have had to show up with a room full of Sun servers if you'd gone back to 2001 or 2002. But today we can do this on a pure VMware environment and tailor the hardware costs to what the scale is. So that's why all this works. And we couldn't have done this as just GenBand or just Sonos Networks. It's the combined entity that's Ribbon that allows all this to happen, combined with all the investments over the last decade in virtualization. Some of the same work that we've done for things like NFV and for some of our federal environments, all sort of combined to make this solution possible.
Greg, there was a question around redundancy and how it compared to a dual C15 core, right? As you mentioned, all these products are existing products that have either I'll call it an HA type mode where you have a high availability mode, right, where you have a primary and a secondary or those kinds of things. So all of these elements are like that. So
yeah, there's geo redundancy and high availability on all the pieces. So, and really, that continues almost to the point where, as much as you want to invest in, if you want to go beyond that, well, you certainly could. In many cases, you can have 2 and 3 failover sites if that's what you want. I think we've pretty much wrapped up all the questions. Have I missed anything, Jeff or Elizabeth?
I'm looking through here. I think that's...
There was a big list, so apologies if we missed somebody. I do apologize. It was a long list. We tried to make sure we hit them all.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for their time today. And again, as I said, this is the beginning of the conversation. I know that many of you already have a relationship with a Ribbon salesperson. If you don't, reach out to us after the webinar. We'll drop you an email. It's easy to respond back. We'd be happy to set up a time to have a one-on-one conversation with yourself or your technical team, whomever is the right person in your organization to start the conversation. So I'm going to wrap it up, and thanks everybody for your time. And Lance, any final words before we sign off?
No, just want to echo that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Again, look out for that email later this afternoon with links to replays and slides. You can always respond to that email with questions and or find more information at ribboncommunications.com. Get a hold of all the people you saw here today and spoke with here today on the webinar. So that's all I have. Thanks, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.